So about a year ago, I was invited to give the closing keynote for a big awards night for entrepreneurs. The audience was 100 of the top business leaders in Canada. So these are the kind of people that they know how to get stuff done, and they expect it to be done well. So I, wanting to do a really good job, pick a talk that I'd given a dozen times or more, one I was super confident in because it had resonated with so many audiences. But something about this time was different. It was about 5 minutes into the talk, and I knew something was wrong. Started to get these signals, these little pieces of information that told me the audience just wasn't there. Signals were things like a disinterested facial expression, or an audience member who turns to their neighbor to chat, more interested in them than me. So I could sense that this talk was not going well, and I started to get nervous. You know that little voice in the back of your head? Well, I'm giving this talk, and that voice is just spinning like, ooh, no, this is not good. Ooh, yeah, bad, going bad, making a fool of myself up here, and still have 30 minutes to get through. The irony in all of this is that I am supposed to be an expert on failure. I was giving a talk about how to deal with failure really well while in the middle of creating what felt like a monumental failure. So imagine that you're me. What would you do? Seriously, imagine you are up on stage, and what you've prepared, that content you know inside and out, is just not working. Would you continue on with what you know, or would you stop and try to come up with something new? By show of hands, who would stop? Cool. And who would push on with the content they know? Okay, about 50-50. Like many of you, I dug my heels in, pushed on with that content that no one was interested in, mostly because I didn't see it as a choice. I felt this pressure from the audience to be this expert. And honestly, I could not think of what else I would talk about, even if I did stop. And I was too scared to give up control and ask the audience what they were interested in. Plus, there was no guarantee that even if I did, the outcome would be any better. So, because I didn't see the choice, I did the only thing I thought I could do. I got super excited. I'm putting in more energy, hoping that, gets the audience into it too. And what do you think the outcome was? Did I win them over? Nope, I didn't. It was just the wrong talk for that audience. And the result was a predictably lousy experience for everyone involved. So just to be clear here, while I didn't see it, I definitely had a choice. I could have chosen to do something new. I'd been working on failure for 4 or 5 years and given over 100 talks at that point. I had the skills I needed to create a new experience for this audience, and I chose not to because I felt pressured and scared. And in doing so, I made a classic error. And it's one we're seeing more and more in these times of rapid change and disruption, where when things are going badly and we're seeing those unexpected outcomes and we're threatened, like I was on stage, we tend to dig our heels in, push harder on the things that have worked in the past, because that's what feels safe. And when we're in those moments, when we feel the least safe, the thing we want to do more than anything is just hold on tightly to what's worked in the past. Now, obviously, I understand that tendency, but as my story shows, it guarantees a lousy experience for everyone involved. It guarantees 30 more minutes of failure. So the purpose of this talk is to explore that exact situation where the things that have worked in the past are no longer working as well as they should. When we're in that situation, how do we see that we have a choice? How do we overcome that internal expectation for control and the external pressure to perform? How do we look for and listen to the signals, that information that tells us which way to go? And how do we come up with and test the possibilities that get us to a better outcome? And just for the record, what I've just outlined here, is not just an outline for my talk. This is the outline for creating a culture of innovation, creating the possibility of excellence by taking the risk and having the courage to do something new. So let's rewind, shall we? I'm up on stage. It's 5 minutes into my talk. I realize it's going really badly. But this time, I see that I have a choice. And it all starts here. Because that spark of innovation, that part one, starts by seeing the need and asking ourselves how we can do better. So I choose to stop, recognizing that the talk isn't going well. And I acknowledge in front of the whole audience, yeah, guys, this isn't working, is it? Not resonating here. Trouble is, remember who this audience is. You know, these people are expecting a practiced, polished, professional keynote. You know, I imagine their response. You know, they start looking around at the people next to them confused. You know, oh, did she really just say her talk isn't going well? How awkward. And everyone, myself included, feels uncomfortable, because this is not normal. It feels bad to stop in the middle of something and start to improvise. And it's awkward because nobody knows what's going to happen next. And the audience, I mean, you can almost imagine them trying to ignore my acknowledgement of the error and wishing I hadn't said anything in the first place. Sadly, this response is typical. We've seen this before on a much, much more tragic scale. The investigation after the Space Shuttle Challenger blew up found that many people knew about the flaw in the O-rings that caused the fatal explosion. They also found that many people spoke up and were ignored. The group had decided to launch, and that expectation and go fever caused them to ignore the signals that told them that they needed to do better. People like me get up on stages like this all the time and talk about how vital and important innovation and change are, as if it's all glamour and fun all the time. Innovation is only fun if everyone wants it and you're good at it right away. Most of the time, everyone doesn't want it. And you are rarely good at it right away. Most of the time, innovation is not glamorous. Change is not fun. It is so hard to be the person calling for change that goes against what's been decided or established. And it's uncomfortable to be the one to say, you know, this isn't working. We need to do better. When, as with the Challenger example, everyone wants to launch. I see this play out in organizations all the time, where that leader has decided on a certain path forward, and for financial or ego or whatever reason, they need that decision to work. And it leaves them blind, and they disregard the signals that maybe they need to adapt as they go and change their plan. What's more is the information about what isn't working often comes from the worker bees at the bottom of the hierarchy, whereas that pressure to perform tends to come from the top. So if you want a culture of innovation, if you want to improve, everyone, but especially leaders, have to create the space for employees to speak up and reward those who have the courage to do so. You have to get over and overcome that expectation and acknowledge the inconvenient truth that what you're doing just might not be working as well as you need it to. You might be wrong. You might need to do better. And you need to always be open to changing your plans, trying something new. So I'm back up on stage. I've stopped, acknowledged what I'm talking about isn't really resonating, even though that uncertainty that creates might make the audience feel a little uncomfortable. The problem is I still have no idea what I'm going to talk about instead. I have no idea what they're going to find interesting. So what do I do? Ask them, right? It's obvious. Not as obvious as you think it is. It's been my experience that when we're thinking about ways to change, we stay really internal to our organizations. We host a brainstorming session, we hold a hackathon, we launch an internal strategic planning process. And all of those are great and fine, but they're not going to give you the answers you need. To get that feedback, those signals, to inform which direction you take, you have to look outside your organizations. Listen to the users of your products and services. But as you might imagine, I'm up here on stage and I say, okay, audience, sorry, talk's not going so well. How do I do better? What should I talk about instead? Nobody's going to have the answer to those questions. Of course not. If this was that easy, I wouldn't be in this pickle in the first place. So imagine instead I ask the audience, so what are you thinking about? Showing up to a talk about failure, what do you expect to learn? What questions are on your mind? Because answering the question of how we do better has to be an exploration, guided by curiosity, where we're listening for those signals and we're figuring it out as we go. 99% of the time, you are not going to be able to ask your customers what you should do. 1, they don't know. 2, they think you should know. But you can ask them about their experiences, their wants, their needs, with curiosity and an open mind. When things aren't working out as you had planned, it's like being lost in a dark forest at night. You have no information, no idea which way to go. But as we start to experiment, to test new ideas and approaches, and as we listen for and acknowledge the signals that we need to do better, it's like being handed a flashlight. We start to see what's around us a bit better. And those experiments, those tests of what might work better, it's like deciding on a direction and taking a step or two forward. We light up more of the path as we do that and get more information. And we may choose the wrong path. In fact, we might choose many wrong paths. But it's that courage to keep trying different ideas, different approaches, that allows us to continue to light up and get the information we need to see when we have the right path in front of us. There are 3 things that I know about creating a culture of innovation. The first, the world is constantly changing. What you're doing now is unlikely to work in the future. You're almost guaranteed to end up in that dark forest at night with only a flashlight. Second thing I know, taking that step, experimenting, learning, and adapting as you go is vital to finding your way out of the woods and staying relevant and competitive. And third, if you feel like you cannot risk failure, you cannot risk choosing the wrong path because of that pressure to perform, then you're thinking about risk and performance all wrong. You have to evaluate based on the risk of staying the same, standing still. So to recap, I'm on stage, recognized this talk isn't going well, realized I had a choice, acknowledged to the audience, and asked some curious questions about how I might do better. You can almost imagine how the rest of this plays out. I listen to the audience answers, pick up a few things that I might test out, what I might talk about instead. And as I test these things, I look for their response, pick up on feedback, and maybe I land on something that really resonates. Or maybe I spend the next 30 minutes lost in the woods. Regardless, I walk away from that talk knowing that I did not guarantee a lousy experience for everyone. Instead, I took the risk and had the courage to try something new, and in doing so, opened up that possibility for excellence. But of course, testing possibilities, coming out with that better outcome, not always as simple as that, which is why I have another example. So I did some work for a tech startup, and my team was in charge of coming up with a new way of collecting data. The old way of calling people up, too expensive and inefficient. I had to figure out a more quicker, better way of getting data. The future of the company depended on us solving this problem. So we heard that signal that we needed to improve, and we got to work. We built partnerships, we created new user experiences, we looked for third-party data providers, we looked at open source data, like we tried a lot of paths. And for the most part, didn't work. Our ideas sucked. We spent months in the woods trying to figure out the answer. And one experiment after another, we just never got there. And more just felt like we were failing, like we weren't good enough or smart enough to figure it out. What I learned from this was that framing our work as experiments, it's just not enough. You have to really know that doing something new, when you don't know if it's going to work or not, it's really hard. You feel inadequate and insecure through all those iterations. And as a leader, goodness, I worried that we would never find the answer to this problem. And this is vital for the future of the organization. The other thing I learned is that you really do need to, at some point, make it fun. And before I start sounding like those people I made fun of earlier, I don't think that innovation is inherently a good time, but I do think at some point, you need to decide, make the choice to see the joy, the excitement, the possibility in the challenge of it. Because when I was working for that tech startup, yeah, it was hard. It was really difficult to keep going, but it was also exciting in a way. Because we started to get a little bit wiser. We got better at recognizing what wasn't working and moving on quickly. And we started to see little glimmers of what might work. Started to see that possibility of excellence. And honestly, if you are working really hard and not seeing that possibility, and you're not having fun, it's probably time to quit. And move on to trying something that you do find exciting and fun, because you're probably not on the right path anyway. You can make the courageous choice to acknowledge when you need to evolve and do better. You can overcome the expectation and go fever and be open to changing your plans. And you can look for that information and signals that tell you how you might move forward, and you can test possibilities until you get a better outcome. That talk I gave at the Entrepreneurship Awards wasn't my first talk. Very obviously, wasn't my last talk. Thankfully, my ability to do my job does not rest on any one presentation or any one failure. Every time I get up on stage, I have the opportunity to try something a bit different. So every talk, including this one, is an opportunity for learning en route to excellence. And my greatest hope is that all of you walk out of this talk seeing those opportunities too, in your life, in your work, those opportunities for courage, for choice, and for change on your journey towards excellence. Thank you.